Addiction really is a very powerful memory combined with a numbed pleasure response. So what makes this pathway so inviting is that your reward circuitry is really numb and you are craving anything to jack up your dopamine. So the addiction is the path of least resistance to relief. That's the best way of thinking about it. Porn is now your most reliable source of dopamine, and your limbic brain is just saying, yes, 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 do it. This is the nature of cravings. This is the nature of cravings. This is what drives all addictions. Cravings are normal. It's what the brain does all the time just to get us to eat, drink, have sex. A cue is a memory, thought, feeling, sensation that activates a craving. Your brain associates the cue with a reward. For example, the smell of cookies baking is a cue to urge you to eat, even if you're not hungry. Think of Pavlov's dogs salivating whenever they heard the bell. If you are a smoker, finishing a meal could be your cue to smoke a cigarette. If you're an alcoholic walking down the street, maybe you see a bar. That could be a cue for you to drink, even if you've been sober for 20 years. For porn addicts, it could be being home alone, or a sexy image popping up, or a flashback to a porn scene. Cues often lead to an altered state. It creates sort of a tunnel vision, an uncontrollable urge to watch porn. Cues are so powerful because they activate that addiction memory, which on the picture is shown in yellow. What happens then is that your limbic system is in charge, and your rational brain is basically out to lunch. If we acted upon all of our urges, desires, or random thoughts, life would be somewhat of a mess. In the slide, the yellow represents our desires, the go for it, and blue represents our rational processes. Please think about it. Normally, there's a delicate balance between the two. Normally. The limbic brain wants you to just do it. For example, punch your boss or eat that pint of ice cream you just noticed was in the fridge. Normally, the rational brain comprehends the consequences of our actions, and it inhibits most impulses that, well, we might regret. Addiction disregards consequences. As the addiction progresses, the brain continues to rewire and your impulse control weakens as the addiction pathway strengthens. For the addiction, we've created a powerful do-it pathway. That's the craving, that's the addiction memory. Here it is in yellow. Just as important, you've weakened the don't do it pathway. Here it is in blue, at least as it relates to the addiction. You have trampled down the go for it pathway, and in a way you've let the grass grow on the think about it pathway. The rational brain really has lost its influence. You know, that's the part of the brain that remembers the past and understands its consequences. It's in a fog now. Now, two things will happen, hopefully, when you quit porn. With use, the blue rational pathway will get stronger. You'll gain more control. The yellow addiction pathway will weaken. In a sense, the grass will grow back into it. But even though addiction pathways will weaken, they may never completely disappear. Tolerance can lead to rewiring. Remember, tolerance, it's the need for more of a drug or activity to get the same effect. It's a major sign of addiction. Now with porn, you have two choices to escalate your use. You can, of course, spend more time watching porn. Or you can watch porn that is more stimulating. This is where the rewiring kicks in. It's not unusual to start out your porn career with images of, let's say, naked movie stars, and then maybe a few weeks later find that you've progressed to girls with goats or maybe even violent rape scenes. Here's a graph that looks a lot like the Coolidge effect, but it's for different flavors of porn, so to speak. Flavor A, flavor B, and other flavors. So these are dopamine surges for novel or different types of porn. You can also see at the bottom there's adrenaline because that can surge also. You see, This rewiring of the brain for novel porn, different types of flavors, is very similar to the Coolidge effect. But instead of getting bored with your current porn star, you're actually getting bored with whatever you're used to watching. And bored means not enough dopamine to get you excited. See, dopamine surges with novelty, but adrenaline also surges with strong emotion, so that plays a part. So if you add in novel and emotional, you're actually getting the biggest reward and, unfortunately, the strongest memories. That's where the rewiring occurs. That's why porn users seek out what shocks them, or what is forbidden or fear-producing, because they're getting the biggest bang of dopamine and adrenaline. The more intense the emotions, or the more they're repeated, the stronger the wiring. And each new experience wires new tastes into the brain. If your sexual tastes have changed, well, so has your brain. Here's a great book, The Brain That Changes Itself. It's on brain rewiring, and if you read it, which I highly suggest, you really get how changeable and adaptable our brains are. He even has a chapter on sexuality. The author is Norman Doidge. Now, he's a psychiatrist, and he's treated heavy porn users. And he's clear on two things. Porn addiction is real. That means it changes the brain. And internet porn can rewire new sexual tastes into the brain. Here's a quote from him. He has many quotes. The current porn epidemic gives a graphic demonstration that sexual taste can be acquired. Pornography, delivered at high-speed internet connections, satisfies every one of the prerequisites for neuroplastic change. Neuroplasticity means rewiring the brain. So, wherever your porn journey has taken you, it's important to keep this in mind. What you look at doesn't matter to your reward circuitry. It just doesn't. It simply craves stimulation. So it likes shocking or surprising, even if you are grossed out by it, even if your cerebral cortex doesn't get it, doesn't understand why you're watching this crap. So maybe you can only get off watching Japanese girls vomiting, like that famous South Park episode, but keep in mind, you can return to where you were before you got on the merry-go-round. Keep in mind, again, the brain can change itself. So what makes internet porn unique? Well, here's some factors that other people have mentioned. There's social factors, such as it's free, it's used in private, it's easily available, and no one knows you have an addiction. So I think those are pretty important. And you also have psychological factors. Recovery sites often stress that the addictiveness of internet porn is due to masturbation and orgasm becoming linked to the exciting visuals. Now, I think that can play a part, no doubt. Also, guilt and shame perpetuate any cycle of addiction, and that can play a part also. But another very important aspect is the way internet porn is used and how that directly affects the reward circuitry and dopamine. Here's my list of what makes internet porn unique. So this list is all about dopamine, how these factors cause dopamine to be elevated for abnormally long periods of time, which of course overstimulates the reward circuit. Number one we've talked about, internet porn affords extreme novelty. So you can just keep clicking, looking at 300 women in a session, however many you want to, and you can have extraordinary amount of dopamine being squirted into your brain. This is what separates internet porn from porn of the past. Here's number two. Unlike eating or addictive drugs, there's absolutely no limit to consumption of internet porn. Unless, I guess, you fall asleep. This is really a big one, because when you look at drugs or food, your brain says stop at a certain point, and then your dopamine drops. With internet porn, you can keep your dopamine elevated for hours on end by watching or edging. That's what really makes it quite addictive. If you do climax, however, you can go ahead and try to override your normal satiation mechanisms by finding something even more stimulating to get you going. And that, of course, takes a lot of dopamine also. You know, number 2 is more about, say, one session. But number 3 here is more about over time. You know, like with food and addictive drugs, you can only escalate by consuming more over weeks and weeks. But with internet porn, you can escalate, of course, with new novel partners, but what usually happens is the escalation takes the form of different flavors and sexual practices. So that's over time. And of course, there are no limits anymore on the internet as far as I can tell. And this, of course, really gooses your dopamine. Number 4 is unique. Unlike food or addictive drugs, internet porn is always available in your brain, waiting to be replayed. I imagine a lot of you have experienced this. Now, it can come in the form of flashbacks, which are wanted or they're unwanted, but they do come back, and when they come back, they cause a rise in dopamine, a little squirt. And that, of course, strengthens your addiction pathways.